And we've really lost that deep connection to fucking how powerful we are. We birth frickin' people through our bodies.
Determination, that drive, that trying to build your assets, that go culture, to a more of a vata phase where you do have that flow and that feminine and femininity coming in, but we see it as a loss of our femininity.
And I think it's always been there, because working with older men, when you see the cracks and the masks come off, they're so wounded and they're so vulnerable.
And then there's that whole sense of, well, who am I? I think that's why women, when they get to this age, they all of a sudden feel very lost and alone.
A long time ago, I started working with my nervous system and the breath because it had to bring me back to the moment. And I think anger is something that has such a dynamic thing, but if it's shoved down, especially in boys, or they haven't been nurtured emotionally, then they're just angry.
But can we have it all and just not be perfect at everything?
Women think that they have to give everything all the time to everything. So welcome to Spill the SpiritualiTEA. This is episode 2. Very excited to have our next guest. She's a beautiful lady, and I know you're going to get a lot of wisdom from Harmony. Harmony is an Ayurvedic and women's wellness practitioner who I have experienced personally, registered nurse, and a visionary founder of the Ayurveda Alchemist Academy with over 10 years experience.
19.
That's my likes. And she's a dynamic force in the holistic well-being. Her innovative higHERself method seamlessly merges with Ayurvedic wisdom, with contemporary science and evidence-based practices empowering women to unlock their full potential, optimize their health, and achieve holistic success. Welcome, Harmony.
Thank you. I'm really, really excited to be here.
I know.
And episode number 2.
Episode number 2. Well, I couldn't not. You've had me on your podcast, which you'll all have to jump over on Harmony's podcast. And I just felt we always had such a great connection.
Yeah.
And for me, I worked with Harmony myself, so I've experienced Harmony's work and we just clicked. I think there's such a very similar resonance on how we work, who we are, and we're boy mums.
Yes, we are.
Which we were just discussing about boy mums. I'm sure that will come up in the conversation. But I think for me it was the impact of the time that I came with you. I've been doing a lot of work on myself. But to go into Ayurveda, and I've done a lot of detoxes and I work with my health. That's been a huge part of my, obviously, awakening, I think, through my body, which is always going to be your greatest teacher.
Yeah.
But I think my health was something, and when I did that cleanse with you, it really awakened something, and I think Ayurveda really works with my body. It's not, I find I'm so sensitive that if I do something drastic, my body just has a retarded reaction. You know what I mean? It really just goes, and I found Ayurvedic soft and deep, yet very emotionally challenging. You know, because and that's what I loved about it, I think, because I love the depth of it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Ayurveda it can be simplified, but in its nature, it is a very complex health science. We look at not only the physical body, and I liked what you said about the physical body can teach you so much, because I know in the spiritual realm and the spiritual sort of world that we're in, a lot of people can disregard the body as just the body and we're not the body and all that. But the body is so important. It is our vessel for all of the other layers that come with being who we are. And
I don't think we're actually, I think where you're going with this too, we can't do this without the human experience, the human body.
Absolutely.
And when we're bypassing the human body and what we hold within it, especially emotionally, which always then expresses it in a health way, we're missing the point of the human experience and what this body is showing us.
So
the
true.
wisdom that it holds.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of the I mean, when we look at the koshas, right, we look at the layers of the body, the energetic layers, like the physical body is that first layer that we really have to master before we can get onto the pranayama kosha, the manamaya kosha, all of the other koshas that are more subtle layers.
And so what's a kosha? Can you explain what a kosha is?
It's an energetic sheath around our being, like, and we can surpass the different koshas by first being really responsive to our physical health and our physical body. But in Ayurveda, we not just look at the physical body, but the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual, and also the dharmic health of an individual, which is our connection and purpose.
Yeah. So it's and that's what I love about it, because everything I've done has been very holistic, because it's not one without the other. Do you know what I mean? And I think sometimes, especially in this type of world that we're in at the moment, there's so much accolades for force pushing, you know, making the body do extreme things, but there's no listening, there's no intuitive guidance to what the body needs, which then comes to the emotional part of it. And I think they're so interconnected that we bypass in such a masculine way really what our body needs. We kind of force over the top. And, you know, I really even learned that with the detox that I did with you, because I recognize that I'm not someone that has a really structured life. I'm very driven in what I do, and when I get things done, it's you know, I get it all done, then I'll have my downtime, and that's what I'm working with, the structure, and probably being more deeper in my foundational work, which is very important to me, especially for my business and my life. But I still need freedom and flow. So I understand both that in myself, and so I work with it very differently. But when I was detoxing with you, I recognized that I didn't really have a schedule with my eating. I didn't really have, even though health has been extremely important, everything I've put in my body, it's conscious. And I'm a health food whore. So I'm like everything I put in has a meaning to me, or it nurtures me, or it nourishes me. So I've always had a very deep connection to food. I think that's probably come really from my stepmom. When she entered my life, we would sit for hours and talk and create food.
Oh, I love that.
So, and she's really been my spiritual mentor since I was 10. And she's so profoundly been a big impact on my life as a woman, and also someone that guided me spiritually into myself in a very different way than I've experienced, because she's not necessarily lovingly motherly, but she's very actively nurturing through what she does, acts of service. And that was the really first, I was like, wow, so food for me means being seen.
Yeah.
And it's not through necessarily eating it. It's through the creation of it, through what it feels like, because we talk about it and we have fun and we related. So it was very interesting when I restrict myself or change something in it, it brought up a lot for me.
Yeah. I also think it depends also on your constitution. So in Ayurveda, we look at the bioconstitution of an individual. So we have the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha.
Yeah.
And we have all three within us, but in varying degrees. And if you've come to see me, there's usually an imbalance in one of those states.
Yes.
And I think you were very imbalanced in your Vata. And Vata, they don't like rules.
No, I don't like rules.
They don't like structure. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But again, it's about working with that freedom and flow, but also the grounding.
Yes.
Because dinacharya, grounding, structure can be very grounding for a Vata person if they're imbalanced, and it's exactly what they need.
Yeah. And funnily enough, my stepmom's Pitta.
Yes. So
Pitta?
Yeah.
What's the other one? It's like, so it's Pitta.
Kapha.
Yeah.
Kapha.
So that's very grounded, isn't it?
Very nurturing.
Yes,
very
so that's
loving.
my stepmom.
Yeah, beautiful.
So it's very interesting on Vata, and like predominantly she would be that for sure.
She would ground you.
She's very grounded. She does that for my dad. She's very embodied, but then very connected. But then not necessarily like you're loving, but you still know she loves you. It's like it's a very interesting. She really embodies someone that can be detached but emotionally there for you.
Wow, that's beautiful. It sounds like she's very balanced then.
And so that's why I always think about that when I come back to food. And I don't like rules,
No.
And I don't like to be struck with freedom has always been a really in relationship, in food, in how I want to work. That's why I probably never worked for anyone before.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, for me, and I was even having this conversation with Danny in episode 1, that it's that, I suppose when you think of grounded and structure, it's masculine. And I had a very probably toxic way in the way I would do things to burn out.
Mm-hmm.
There was no structure in it. I'd either be off or on. You know what I mean? I wasn't balanced in my flow as much as I was my groundedness. You know, it was either very emotional or very off, or, you know, I'd go into this loop all the time. And I think even coming to you, that really made me recognize, especially now coming into midlife, it doesn't work the same way anymore. You know, your body reacts, and my body's always reacted anyway, but it's definitely changed another level now since I've hit 52.
100%. Yes, we do change. And I think it's really beautiful reflections what you're saying, because Ayurveda, at its core, it's all about cultivating more self-awareness. And that's how we can heal. That's how we can balance. That's how we can change, is by being really self-aware of where we're at and what we are doing to throw ourselves out of balance. And what we may not know what we can do to bring ourselves back into balance. And that's the whole thing. That's where that support comes in as well.
And I think that's something that we've never really until now recognized, that sometimes it's okay to ask for help and to get, especially as women, you know, we are so hyper independent. And I think we've definitely come from an era of hiding things, being hyper independent, putting up a type of mask of like, yeah, we're all good. But that then inhibits also and throws our balance out hormonally, emotionally, physically, everything, because we're not truly listening to what we need.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think is when we've lost that innate knowing and divine kind of power that we have within ourselves and our bodies, that we've lost through society, and we had this conversation, Danny and I, with competition. We had this conversation before, competing against each other. And I think women are really having to redefine our relationships to ourselves and our bodies and to each other.
Absolutely. And I also think in our culture in the West, that transition, so I see a lot of women in perimenopause, so transitioning from perimenopause, so we're talking like maybe 40s through to their 50s, 60s. So that period of time as being not celebrated, as being almost embarrassing, or as like, oh my God, like I'm going through menopause and
but
this
like
is shameful. Yeah. We both said it. Yeah. Whereas in the Eastern cultures, it was celebrated as almost like another awakening. So you're stepping into your wise womanhood.
Yes.
And you're seen as, and I know we don't like this word, like an elder, but you're seen as the wise woman. And so from an Ayurvedic perspective, you're also moving out of that pitta phase of life, which is that determination, that drive, that trying to build your assets, that go culture, to a more of a vata phase where you do have that flow and that feminine and femininity coming in, but we see it as a loss of our femininity. So I think there has to be a change in the way that we perceive this transition 100%. Because we're only stepping, or I'm not there yet, but women are only stepping into their power. Yes. Like this is their true power when they're stepping into that wise womanhood phase.
This is, to me, is the most, like, I feel like
aware.
Oh my God. Like for me, even just since I turned 52, the last month has been so impactful and empowering for me. And it's like it's shifted me somewhere else. And I've only just probably maybe hit perimenopause. It's only just started for me. I was like, oh, okay. And it's different, like watching my body. But I think through my health issues previously, it really brought me from not having any problems and being able to force myself to burnout, you know, from chronic fatigue to glandular fever to, you know, all of the things that I created through forcing and being such a sensitive and emotional person as well, and probably not really having that grounded connection to my body. And I think the more I worked with my nervous system, the more I came back into my body quieten the mind, the distinct impact that had on my body is now really translating how I'm moving into midlife.
Yeah.
And I've actually restructured my business to work with people in midlife, because exactly what you said, I feel like it gets to this stage that all of a sudden you're unattractive, you're not seen, you're having all these changes in your body that aren't socially acceptable, supposedly. And it's like the end of the life. It's like it's like all of a sudden you kind of put out to pasture and you're like some fat old cow's like, okay, thanks for your milking years. You know what I mean? It's like, but to me, we're missing, and this is what we need so much, is the guidance of women that have been through so much, and to share the realness and the raw experience of remembering themselves. And we've lost that.
Yeah. And I think what you said, like, you know, almost like an end of a life, putting out to pasture, it is an end in some degree to a certain part of our life.
But it's hooray.
It's a hooray. It's a rebirth. Like, it is a rebirth. This is the big finale.
Yeah, this is like,
hallelujah.
I remember saying to my mum when I first got my period, I was like, oh my God, can't I go? What, I think I said something to her, like, is this going to end? She said, oh, not for a really long time. And I went, oh, just put me into menopause now. I think I said that when I was like 14. I was like, I was done with it when I first. It was just going to get in my way. You know, I didn't. But like, I actually, funnily, I had the conversation with Dan. We never got taught deeply about our bodies and that connection to our period and our cycle. And, you know, I think we've been really programmed into a man cycle. You know, a 24-hour cycle when we aren't structured like that. We've never really been taught to flow with the month that we had. And I'm only really starting to understand that deeply. And mine's about to end. I mean, I'm like 52 and never really had a deep connection to the power of my cycle. And I think that's really sad, because the deep connection to my body and the power, that it was like an inconvenience more than it was something I could flow with or learn with or nurture, and use those sort of seasons in my month to actually, even in my business, in my life, to flow with it instead of forcing against it like I was supposed to be on every day in a certain way that never served me ever. And I knew it didn't. And it's only probably really since I probably had my second child, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I was 40 when I had Tyler. So, and I didn't have the time to worry about what everyone else was doing. And I think not worrying about everybody else and coming really internally in tune with me to be a better mum for them slowed me all the way down to go, well, what does my body need?
Yeah. And I think even women who do go through menopause and they don't have their menstrual cycle, because I get this question a lot in my program, they ask, well, how do I, like, I still feel changes throughout the month, but I'm not cycling, I'm not having a menstrual cycle. Like, how do I connect with that? And you know, again, at its core, Ayurveda is all about, it brings us insights from nature. Like, we are nature, we are part of nature, but we have disconnected ourselves so much.
Yeah.
And so for women who are still wanting to connect to that cyclical way of being, which is our natural innate ability as a woman, is, I do say, like, look at the moon cycle and track your symptoms for 3 months around the moon. Obviously, you won't be bleeding, you know, throughout those 3 months, but just see where there's a pattern, because you will find there is a pattern. And dependent on how you feel at the new moon to the full moon, you can create rituals around that as being like your menstrual cycle. And so there's a lot of misconceptions as well, as we're all meant to be menstruating on the full moon or something. And if you're not in sync with nature. That's all bullcrap as well, right? I mean, in the traditions, like in the Vedic traditions, years and years before we were all here, the reasons that some women menstruate at different times is that you have the women who are menstruating were, you know, because they were so much more in touch with their body and their cycle, they were put to rest. So they were menstruating women were put to rest. It was celebrated.
Why do we do that?
The women who were ovulating and naturally have that ovulating spirit and that energy that ovulation gives us, they were the ones taking on the gathering jobs and the caring of the women with their menstrual cycles, children and so on, because they worked as a community. community, right?
Yeah.
Which we don't either.
And that's the thing I think we've lost. Like you said, that community where there's support.
Yeah.
We're doing it alone in a home, so totally separate, in competition with women, not in sync.
No.
And wondering why we're so exhausted. And a mum of boys, which we just had this conversation. Balls in the house, and boys are so noisy and they're on all of the time until literally they're in bed.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's getting them into bed.
Yeah.
And I love them. And funnily enough, I think boys are so unseen of how sensitive they are.
Mm-hmm.
And we just had this conversation and we've kind of skewed a little bit, but how sensitive, and as you get into the teenage years, how much more present you have to be.
Oh, yeah.
Emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another layer of like going through, and this is why I love that. Great, I've got teenage boys that are hormonal and I'm moving into menopause. I think we kind of skewed that a little bit, but it's interesting to have all of these different syncing hormones going on because they're completely opposite.
Oh, yeah.
But then there's still needs that come with what those hormones are presenting as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's this kind of deep understanding, if you can tap into that wisdom of yourself as a woman, then you can see that very easily. And the reactiveness doesn't need to be there because you go, oh, I can see what you're doing. I can understand what you're feeling. I remember that. But as a girl, you know, there's a deep compassion for what they're experiencing. But it's the chance to sit back and remember. And if you can be more present in your body with what you're doing instead of fighting against this, or what the changes are, or how you're feeling, or the unpredictability maybe of it. And I think that's the cool part. We're all moving into the unknown all of the time. And there is no rule book in the sense of where we're going as a collective. But I think we're all navigating deeply this new remembering of ourselves. But I think as women and as men, the feminine part of us is coming much more online. So all of this stuff that we're learning now, which seems to be so much more present, that, like you said, in Ayurveda, this was already there. Yeah. And it was like, not that it was hidden, but it was like rejected or kind of put to something like spirituality in a sense, like woo-woo-ness, that now it's like, what have we been doing?
Exactly, yeah. And it's, finally, once again, being seen for the science, the health science that it is, you know, and that connection to nature, us being part of nature, cultivating greater sense of self and awareness, because through that we can only make these greater realizations that are going to help us heal and move forward and evolve. And that's what, as we were talking at the very start, being like in this human vessel, this human body, our whole role is really to evolve, right? And so that's how we do it, with greater self-awareness. And whether that's with our physical symptoms, our mental, emotional symptoms, connecting with our community, our children.
Yeah. It's all a reflection.
It is.
And I mean, that's what I found with my body. You know, the more I forced against it, the more it was telling me, and it got louder. But emotionally, I'd learnt a certain way of being to cope with what I was brought up in. So, and to shove my sensitivities as far as I could down. And like we talked before about with Dan, it was like the people, you know, how we've learnt as women to perform in a certain way. And we've really lost that deep connection to fucking how powerful we are. We birth frickin' people through our bodies. Like, I mean,
we're a vessel.
The vessel. And I think the dissatisfaction that we have with this vessel as such, that it's not perfect. It's fucking perfect in all of it. And I've spent so much time having a mum that needed to have everything perfect to try and live up to those standards that are so unrealistic, that she was passed down, you know, through this unworthiness and not good enoughness and all of those things that belief systems and we hold deeply. But I even watched her through her midlife. She never talked about it with us. I remember it was we'd left. I left when I was 17, so I was out. But, you know, my sister had stayed and then they'd moved, but she never talked about it. And it's funny because she's passed now. So I've been asking my stepdad, what did mum go through? Like when she was going through menopause. He didn't really know her much because she used to hide so much.
Yeah.
So it was like there was no expression. So not even from your period, there was no sharing or expression about bodies, or everything was so hidden.
Again, I think it comes down to that shameful and dirtiness about
Yeah.
the female body, right?
Yeah.
And you bleed from there, like, ew, like no one
my
needs
boys
to
have
know
just got
that.
it all. Like my poor boys, they was
Same.
like, oh, Mom. I'm like, but I'm like, you're going to have a girlfriend one day, or you're going to have a wife one day, maybe daughters. And if you're not in tune with how they're feeling emotionally, how are you going to show up?
Exactly. I think it is that one of the most important jobs in the world is to raise good men, because there might not be enough of them, but we can definitely help.
And I think that's something that really touches me, because I knew, being a boy mum, my responsibility.
It's huge.
From the moment that women just have an innate knowing. I knew that independent girls are very different, but you're their first love. And I know a father is to a daughter, but there's something significant, because you're the birther, you're the carer. For that first 0 to 6, that nurture, that emotional and spiritual protection that you hold in that attachment creates how you are going to relate for the rest of your life to the opposite sex, to your significant other, however that is in the feminine. You know what I mean? It's like, and I've seen it working with men, and I work deeply with men, just how much that does affect. That mother wound is just so profound. And I knew straight away when I had the boys, I'm like, this is a really important path.
Oh, yeah. It's huge. It's a huge role. And that's what I, say a lot to my boys. Like, they might think I'm strict, but I'm doing it out of love, because you're the next generation of men that are here to honor, protect, and cherish the women, and show other men how to do that as well. I think especially now in an epidemic of domestic violence and things that's going on in the world, like, we really do need to change that narrative. And the boys who are growing up today, they're the ones that are going to be able to do that.
And they're so different too. Like, and like I said to you before, I find the depth of boys' sensitivity. And I think it's always been there, because working with older men, when you see the cracks and the masks come off, they're so wounded and they're so vulnerable. It's just there's not a space. And I think women then are so masculine in a lot of ways that it's kind of like, well, that's a bit weak, because we've been taught to be
that narrative
that if we can't be vulnerable, and then you're vulnerable, and then it's kind of like it gets rejected in both of us.
Yeah.
And then there's no safe place for this open communication of really, really raw inner child feelings that have not been nurtured or felt, and no fucking knows what they need.
Yeah. And so important, because I think a lot of the issues is that pent up, like, repressed emotions that end up coming out in these men who haven't been allowed to freely express them, to feel supported and held in those moments where they've needed to, or as that narrative has been for, us as women and them as men, is like, toughen up, especially in Australia.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my God, get over it.
Get over it. Toughen up, mate.
Yeah. And especially for little boy, don't cry. Like, I even watch it it has definitely changed. Both my boys play AFL. And I've even watched there's so much more nurture from the coaches now than it's not necessarily. Zane's a little different, like, in that I've noticed there's still, depending on what coach you get, but if they can be really nurtured through how they navigate their sensitivities on the field, and instead of repressing it, learn to find resilience in it, then they navigate their anger very differently, and they're not shamed for it. It's not being forced back down. They can use that as a really present power. And I think anger is something that has such a dynamic thing, but if it's shoved down, especially in boys, or they haven't been nurtured emotionally, then they're just angry. And I see that so much in the resentment and the anger that a lot of men are holding towards women, even if they're not really aware of it. They don't trust women.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's really
and
interesting.
I really think it comes back from not trusting their mum because their mothers didn't protect them.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
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 And
Wow.
I always knew that deeply, especially working with men and women. And don't worry, I was coughing in the last one.
I'll just do a clean break so he knows where to edit.
Yeah, so I find it a really powerful dynamic now because I think we're all really having to step into balance that masculine and feminine within ourselves, because when we can really nurture ourselves, then it really empowers strong masculinity. Balanced, grounded, like you're talking about, going even back to, the doshas, like that balance. And that's what my stepmom gave me, even though she's not necessarily extremely feminine, and my mum was extremely feminine, but completely disconnected. So I had I had two women that were completely opposite that were role models in my life. And they came in at different impactful times, obviously, but so perfectly placed. And then, so that was a great thing, but a very confusing thing. But now I'm moving into this space of my life. I'm like, I'm ready. I feel like my life's beginning again.
I love that.
It's really weird. It feels like I've always known I've had a purpose from a really young age because I could see things and understand things and always could feel what other people weren't saying.
Love that.
And so for me now, it's like, great, I can use that because it's not a reflection of me anymore. I can really sit in my power and hold that, and also walk away from things, hold my space within things, know how to work with myself emotionally for my boys and myself to keep moving in a way that is only going to empower me. And I feel like I've handed my power over my whole entire life. And this is my time that I'm just like, I'm in. I'm all in to be seen. I'm all in to be messy. I've got nothing to hide. I've worked through.
When do you think that realization happened? Like, what changed, do you think?
I mean, I think it changed when I had kids. Then it changed again when I separated. I feel like I've had these really specific moments that I've chosen myself in my life. But I think knowing as I was getting older, and I've spent probably 3 years significantly single, by choice in a lot of ways, I've wanted to have a relationship, but then if it's not working and I've given it my all and I've taken whatever, I feel like the relationships I've had been very karmic, that I've got to work with myself deeply on that. So it's not only like I've done my inner child work, I feel like I've gone through the DNA layer. No, I've gone deeper and deeper. And I suppose you'd see that in the layers of, like you were talking about, of the body. The depth that I've been able to hold myself through, I feel like ancestral stuff, things that are in my DNA, not just my programming, but society. It all feels different the way it expresses in your body. From inner child, like this lifetime stuff, to past and to program stuff. It just feels, and when I could recognize how that played out in my life in relating or with my kids, something just changed. And every time I backed myself more in choices that I made with where I was putting my energy and how I was relating, and then to be able to walk away not knowing was always about me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard when you're younger, I think.
Oh,
but so you've stepped into your wise womanhood era.
I'm so ready for wise woman, babe.
You're stepping into that wise womanhood era where all of the layers just come undone because it's just, there's nothing left but pure honesty and pure rawness, and you've stepped into that higher self, that higher version of you.
Yep. And I see so much in my clients too, and you will probably see this in yours, especially when you get to this middle age and your hormones are going all over the shit show. I feel not too bad, I think, because I've constantly stayed very connected to my body, and I don't attach to what's going on. I just flow with what is at the time, with what I need. Okay, so not feeling that great today, but I don't attach to it. I kind of let that be okay, and then nurture what's needed on that time or day. And but I find so many people, and especially women, have so much of their little girl wounds coming into their wisdom years that just don't serve them.
Yeah.
And it really breaks my heart because there's such a disconnection in how fucking powerful they can be because they haven't integrated everything. Life is just happening to them now.
Mm-hmm.
And they've lost the fact that it even can be happening for them because they're losing everything that they had worked so hard for. Body, mental stability, everything just comes flying out because I feel like when your hormones change, body changes, there's no protection anymore in the sense of like your nervous system is changing.
Yeah.
And you can't navigate things the same way emotionally.
And then there's that whole sense of, well, who am I?
Yeah.
I think that's why women, when they get to this age, they all of a sudden feel very lost and alone.
Yes.
And that the high incidence of like depression and anxiety and all of that kicks in. Not only is there a real physical response on your hormones and what it's doing to your body, but also that sense of identity.
Yeah.
Your kids, your kids have grown up, they've moved out. You either stuck in a career that you never really liked or you didn't get to where you wanted to go in it, or maybe you're doing something that you did like but you're feeling just that sort of disconnection and loss of purpose. And again, body's changing, and if that's...
Do you reckon, well, I know probably the answer to this, and you will probably know this too. Do you reckon it was kind of set up that way for us?
Set up?
I think in a sense of a societal way for women to really not know themselves.
Yeah, I was about to say we've set that up for us.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, do you think that, or do you think that's a patriarchal kind of way where it's a very masculine shutting down of the femininity of the power?
Yeah, I think society's set that, as in society set that up for us. I don't think nature set that up for us.
Nature definitely did not set that up.
I think we as a society have definitely set that up.
And I watched this, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this movie called, I think it's called The Pod Generation.
No, I have not seen it.
Oh my God. It's it was very interesting. So it's about obviously, women are now, they're in the workforce. But I feel like a lot of women are working like men.
Oh, yeah.
And we're competing against men for men's positions and the power and the way we want to be boss. This is all boss babe era.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think that it's a very toxic masculine way of working because women aren't designed to work that way. I think we need flow, but then I don't think we mean to stay in the manifesting flowy state. I think we need to have aligned action, but that's in a masculine way, but not in the force doing, to the extent that we're at burnout. There has to be a really innate connection to ourselves and flow within ourselves, that balance of masculine and feminine within us, not outside of us. But this was really interesting because the women were obviously everything's like in the future where there's not a lot of nature. Okay. Everything's what do you call that when they do like AI and the holographic, the nature it's not holographic, it's
all artificial intelligence. Yeah.
So you sit in nature pods and you have the right air, and anyway, so they have these pods that women can have babies in. So instead of holding them in their body, because they're obviously valuable parts to work, they can have a womb. It's kind of like a womb center.
Wow.
And so these pods are basically right, how we've talked about nature and nurture, and it's like the right music, the right environment in the sense. So it's basically saying that women's wombs aren't okay because there's disruption and there's life and there's feelings, and if we create this perfect environment, imagine the type of kids we will have. Plus women can keep working. It's not going to disrupt their life. And I've seen this being set up through the innate disconnection in birthing. And the power of our own body to birth and to look after children and breastfeeding and all of these things that we're told as mothers that seems so confusing now, which was so natural. And there was no other choice really, do you know what I mean, in nature. But then now this whole pod generation, they've got these perfect pods, a big corporation that are putting your egg, and it's like a womb in these eggs. And you would talk to it and have it set in this perfect environment, and it was birthing through that. And women were like going, oh, we can't afford that. It's so great that your body doesn't have to change. And it's a really interesting movie. But what I really got from is like this one couple ended up taking their pod out to nature and cracking it open, and they didn't want it to be birthed that way. but it was her being very structured and in a man's world and living a certain lifestyle. She didn't want to give up her corporate position. And I do think as a mother, there's this we can't have it all kind of thing. If we're going to be a present mother and we're a woman, and that's obviously we lose time.
Yeah.
But do we?
Well, I think that also comes back also down to the fact that, we're talking about having to uphold this perfect persona all the time. But can we have it all and just not be perfect at everything?
Yes.
Like we both have businesses, we have kids and so
and
on.
it's messy.
And it's freaking messy. And it's, it is messy. So you can have it, but it's when you let down the expectations.
But something has to give.
Oh, 100%.
All
Something
the time.
has to
and
give.
I think that's what people don't recognize.
But that's life, right?
I'm not going to give up time with my boys or being present with them. So they're always going to come first out of my business and everything else. Like they're first. And that's why I set my life up the way I did. And that will probably disappoint some people that I'm always present in my business, but it won't be my priority.
Yeah.
And that has always been, that's why I work for myself. But I'm very present with the people that I work with, but it's not that balance sometimes, like, there has to be give and take, and there's a little shift in responsibility and how that rolls. And I think women think that they have to give everything all the time to everything.
And you can't.
No.
You just can't. That's not life.
And it has to be you first.
Yeah.
And we're not taught to give to ourselves first because we're selfish or we're up ourselves or we're, you know what I mean? And I think we lose that beauty of ourselves when we're not serving ourselves first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's what I see a lot in my clinic is straight up is women have dropped their boundaries with themselves, with others, with people around them. It's like one of the main things that I see is boundaries of
How does it present in health?
With their health, they come in extremely anxious, extremely fatigued, stressed. They've got adrenal fatigue. Maybe they've got thyroid issues.
All women have
weight gains,
or have experienced it at some time when they're out of balance.
Oh yeah, they hormone. Like we think about hormonal imbalance just being our sex hormones, like our estrogen and our progesterone. They generally will go out of balance because our stress hormones, which are our bossy hormones, are the ones to go out first, and they start to come in, take over and boss around the sex hormones, which drops. Yeah, they just boss around. They're like, don't need you, don't want you here, I'm more important.
And that's a very toxic masculinity way of dealing with women. Do you know what I mean? If you look at how sometimes, we've been talked about from men, oh, you got your period. Oh, it's that kind of like, oh, really? Like, do we have to do this right now? Or that's a bit dramatic or you're a bit, you know what I mean? Like, and I know before my period, I won't put up with any shit. Yeah. The shit that I would put up with at the start of the month, you got nothing on the week before. And that's not because it's like, I've done this all month, dude. We need some time to step up. This is a collaborative effort here. I'm happy to pull the weight, but if we get to this week, we're not. It's not happening.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think with hormonal imbalance, it's not just those hormones that get out of balance, it's all of them because, again, it's bringing the body back into a homeostatic balance, which is a balanced state of being, and that's with our hormones as well. So once one goes, climb and goes nuts, then the other ones will follow suit because they have no choice. So our stress hormones are like those bossy leaders that can push us all around. So a lot of the time our health issues, we can really, on a real physical level, like on a scientific level, track it back to our stress. And a lot of that stress comes from not having boundaries with ourselves, not giving ourselves enough self-love and care, overworking ourselves, being too much into the masculine, our emotional state of being, like how we are perceiving everything that's going on around us and how we are taking on those emotions deeply inside us, and that will change our chemical response in our body on a very real physical level.
Well, we're in a constant state of a nervous system reaction to life.
Yes, 100%.
And, I think that's been my greatest gift a long time ago, starting working with my nervous system and the breath because it had to bring me back to the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to process what was, because every time I bypassed it or tried to move away what was present, I would hold that in, and we've learned to do that our whole entire lives. Hold it down, don't be so dramatic, zip your lip, and that was never something I was good at. Ever. Emotionally, I can't hide my emotions. I never have been able to. And when they come up, I just know how to navigate my own now, that it's not necessarily a reaction to anyone. If it is a reaction, then straight away I go in.
Mm-hmm.
Straight away when I feel something from someone else, kids, partners, whatever, friends, I go directly in. And then I follow that back. Firstly, calm my nervous system down, quieten the thoughts, come back into my body. What am I feeling? And then I follow that cord all the way back, most of the time I'll already know because I've done this. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. I know what that is. Yep, cool. And then I just kind of bring myself back into that balance. And that's really changed the way I navigate everything because I can be more present, I can be more calm, and I know what I need.
I think the breath is one of the most underutilized tools that we have, and everyone has access to it.
Yeah.
They just don't know how to use it, which is an odd thing to say since we're breathing all the time. If we're not breathing properly, we're dead almost.
100%. And I think because we are in such a nervous system reaction, our bodies stay in that sort of quickened breath, shortened breath. And I think we don't really want to feel. So if we deepen the breath, we have to feel.
Yeah.
And when we have to feel, then you have to come into your body, and then you have to actually observe where it's come from. And then there's so many levels and layers in that, and a lot of self-responsibility. Because, yes, things have happened. Yes, life is happening. But unless you're going to recognize it's for you and why, and you can't stay victim to it, the only way you can become, in the sense of victor to it, is to take your part out of it.
Yeah.
What is my part in it? What is the gift in it? What do I need to heal in it? And how can I move forward with it to empower myself?
And I think there's a lot of women who are ready for that, for sure. But I
think it's a massive awakening right now.
100%. But then there's also the people that are just so much more comfortable in staying where they're at because it's the known.
Yeah.
The healing, the journey to move forward and to feel, everything is the unknown, and that's scary. Like really scary to some people. Yeah.
You lose, but the thing is, you're lost already.
Yeah.
So what if you're only losing the shit you don't want anymore?
Yeah.
And that takes courage.
It does, yeah.
And there is a sense of like, who am I going to be on the other side? Because when you've played a role for everyone else to feel comfortable, and then you let go of that role and you stop making everyone feel comfortable, they're not going to react so well to that. But if you can back yourself and people don't have to understand you, it does come around when you can hold that within yourself and clearly then be able to express how you feel. Once they understand, there does come balance back into it.
Yeah.
But it's a reciprocal balance. It's not a role-playing balance.
Yeah. And I think that comes back to what I said, like a lot of the women who come in, they have lost touch with all boundaries to self and to the people around them. But also they can feel really resentful that people are overstepping their boundaries. But if you are not articulating your boundaries, how do they know that they're overstepping them if you've made that a pattern that's so familiar?
And it's so easy to fall back into and like, then we can, kind of self-criticize ourselves. Oh, I thought I set the boundary, but I didn't. But you get a payoff for not really fully owning it. And I don't even think it's like you're not pushing people away. You're just like, this is how I feel and this is what I need. And if that doesn't work for you, it's completely okay. But I'm only here for reciprocated relationships and co-creating something together. And I want everyone's needs to be fulfilled. It's not just about mine. But unless I can clearly feel and know what I need to express it to you, you're not going to know.
Yeah.
And I think as women, we kind of expect everyone to know what we need. It's like, well, why do you know what I need? And because we're doing all the things, thinking people are recognizing what we're doing, but we're just playing a role. And if you don't know what you need and you're not serving that within yourself first, no one's going to recognize that you need something because you're just doing it all.
Exactly. I think it's so much easier to be asked like what you don't like, what you don't want. And we can list off probably off the top of my head, I don't want this, I don't like this. But to be asked, what do you actually want? what do you love? Like,
most
how do you
women
want to
don't know.
And
it's kind of I find that really sad, and I know that you will see this in your clinic as well. It's like it's that lost feeling. We're completely detached to our bodies. We're completely attached to that nurture, that femininity of ourselves. And I think men and women, this is not just a woman thing. I think it's that self-soothing, that nurturing, that being able to feel all the way through to go, that's what I needed in the first place. But our needs were never met in childhood, so we limited how we feel, and so those emotions get cut off. So we get to this stage that if we don't feel, then we don't know what we need. So it's like we need to connect all that back so we can follow that all the way in and hold ourselves differently and not fear it. It's just fear.
Yeah, fear is just an emotion. And I think that is also, you know, having to take radical responsibility of us now as women, as adults, and not always, I know like the childhood trauma will definitely have an impact on this. In Ayurveda, we look at the layers of the mind. There's so many different layers of the mind, and they all do wonderful, great things. And we can be really strongly dominated in one layer of the mind as opposed to others, right? And so it definitely plays an impact. But then as an adult, as a woman, we do have to step into the responsibility of, okay, so this has happened, but now I get to make choices moving forward.
Yeah. And that is a choice. It's a conscious choice daily to meet yourself differently and to dive into those layers. And I think it so meets physically, you know, and all, like you say, in all the layers of Ayurvedic, as it's just, it's so intertwined. And I think we have to approach ourselves, especially as women, as multidimensionally, but also holistically, because we can't do this without moving it through our physical body and clearing it.
And I think when you understand yourself on a deeper level, for instance, like say there's been childhood trauma, that leaves what we call samskaras, which imprints on the chitta mind, which is the subconscious mind. When you can start to understand that, you react in a different way because you know that is a factual, you know, state of mind, a samskara in the chitta mind, the subconscious mind, that is influencing your behaviors and the way that you react. But if you have never heard that fact or you don't know that, you just think it's you and it's part of you and you don't understand. So the more layers you can pull back, the more you can learn about yourself and you know, that it's not just a human body, a spirit, soul, like a mind. There's layers of each of those.
100%.
And when we can tap into all of those layers and unravel what needs to be like paid attention to in order to bring back balance, then that's where we can really evolve to that next step. That's where we can really step into our higher self. And as you mentioned in the bio, I've got my higher self methodology, which is the 3 pillars of being able to step into your higher self is optimizing your health. So health alchemy, and that's the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and dharmic health, which is connection and purpose. The empowered mind paradigm is the 2nd pillar, and that's really understanding the layers of the mind and how your mind works so that you can't heal or you can't even be in a, you know, grow a business from a disempowered state. You have to move into an empowered state to do anything great.
100%.
And then the 3rd one is dharmic impact, is like the impact you're making in your life accordance to your dharma, so connecting to your deeper sense of self and purpose. And when you can bring all these together, you really step into your higher self. But if you're not meeting any of those, you're going to feel in that state that we've been talking about, that loss of identity, that victimhood.
Yeah, well, you're in completely a wounded reaction to life and it's happening to you, instead of being able to step back and respond differently and move within and then come through that in much more empowered way that's going to serve you.
Yeah.
And it is. And I think that's where midlife should be, that you have the ability. And I think with the energy that we have really on the planet now, we can move through shit that when I started, you know, years ago, it was so heavy and dense. Like there's so much empowerment and information and clarity and support in how to do this, and you're not alone. And I think whatever resonates with you, and that's what I love about it, everyone's got their magic and their, I suppose, medicine in a way that they bring that. And sometimes you need to hear it from one unique person, and we can't compare ourselves to each other. because what you bring and how you will say it will connect so distinctly to someone and they'll go, oh my God. But someone could have said it a million times to them and not hit the way it hits when they hear it from you.
I feel like my husband does that. I tell him
that's
things all the time, and then he hears it from a friend and goes, hey, guess what? I'm like,
my God.
Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I wonder where. But I think sometimes that is too, hearing it sometimes from, it's in your awareness, then all of a sudden, okay, I'm ready to receive it now.
Totally.
And we always have to be ready, but I think everything we do is a choice. And I think that then we have to learn how to meet ourselves on a moment-to-moment basis to make those conscious choices. It's not just this one-off, tick off the to-do list, mint, I'm healed, or I'm empowered. It's a very conscious choice to walk this path, and it takes a lot of grit.
It does.
And it's messy and it's uncomfortable. But I love, for me, your philosophy, and I love you because what you did for me, and it was only a very short time, but everything, the way we connected and how we see the way we work and being boy mum and everything we're navigating is so in alignment that I always just, I don't know, we just
connect.
Yeah, just connect.
Soul connect.
Yeah. It was just like, oh yeah, I know you.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, it's just been such an effortless connection between us that there's always this kind of, we're just walking around each other doing our thing, but I've always got so much love and support for you, and I just really honor what you're doing and watching you evolve in your business, and it's just beautiful to see you navigate your boys and step into your own power of your business, because it's really transformed. And anyone that comes on your path with, whether it's for their health or for their, working into a higher alignment with their business, I think will get so much from you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you too.
So thank you for coming. And if anyone wants to find Harmony, I'll have everything in the show notes for you to connect to Harmony. But thank you for being on my second podcast, darling.
Oh, I loved it. It was so much fun. I that connection just goes so deep. I mean, I think the topics we have just gone through, well, I can't even count them.
I know, we kind of like went around them a million, and that's how I love, because, when you open up the space and you can just let it be, it will pull from so many different directions, but all come back to the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think we're all coming back to the same thing. We were all really trying to find that deeper connection to ourselves where we feel empowered and not so alone.
Yeah.
We want to feel seen. And I think that comes from a deep connection to our femininity, then it aligns to this really powerful strength in our own masculinity, that it just works internally together, that we then can have these deep connections and not feel like we're trying to pull from anywhere else.
Yeah.
We're just walking side by side. And I love that. And I just, thank you.
Walking side by side. I love that
too.
I
know. Don't you think that? I really love that. And I feel like something in where I've come into is I'm finding that I'm walking side by side with so many amazing women, especially, but men now. And I feel like this is the path to really understanding and creating a new way of being.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me and walking beside me.
I know. Thank you, my love.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining me.